It's Grandmaster Shaymin again here with another anime review for you guys, and today, well, we're going to be talking about a very interesting show. Now, the harem genre has been around for a long time. A really long time. It's been around for freaking ever. Some of them are pretty solid. They've got a solid group of characters. Most of the time, the main character is pretty god-awful, and, it is what it is. Others are practically the worst thing you'll ever see in your entire life. But there's none quite like this show. Now, well, this group of shows, this series of shows. And what's interesting to me about this series that we're going to talk about today is that the harem genre kind of takes a back seat, but always seems to come up again and always seems to just interfere with the shows at the most inopportune times. Like, a show, in my opinion, especially something as intense and thought-provoking as this one, I don't think you should be taking entire episodes to sit there and discuss the main character's fetishes. I mean, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm the weird one. But personally, I think that sitting there and talking about the generic main character fetish of the episode, well, shit is going down, isn't something that would generally happen in a real world scenario, or even a logical fake world scenario. But despite what I think, it happens in today's anime review series that we're going to talk about, the Monogatari series. Well, this series takes place in a really large city of some sort. I can't. It's just a really big city, and we've got the main character, Koyomi Araragi. Oh, sorry, bit my tongue. If you guys haven't seen the series, well, you'll get it if you watch the show. But, well, in order to talk about the series in full, it's going to be prone to just a couple of spoilers. It's mostly going to be the 3 movies at the beginning that I'm going to have to spoil a little bit, because those came out after the show started. So in the 2010 version, which I believe was Neko Monogatari Kuro, the first 3 movies didn't exist. So it started off with you knowing that Koyomi Araragi used to be a vampire and was cured. The only problem is that he does maintain a little bit of his vampirism. Like, he heals really fast, and his teeth remain really sharp and white. He doesn't really have to brush his teeth very often because they're impressive. And that's about it. Now that we have the 3 movies, it seems like I'm kind of spoiling something, but the problem with that is that the 3 movies came out, recently. Meanwhile, the show started in 2010. So, for people liking and watching the series, it had been a known fact since the beginning. No one knew exactly all the details until those movies came out. So, just a little bit of spoilers which I do apologize for. I don't really like to do that, but I literally can't talk about the show without doing at least that much. Because, again, the show started in 2010. It's not really too much, though. I mean, I'm not spoiling how it happened or, any of the major scenarios in that, and I highly recommend you go watch it because it's kind of intense. But we'll get to that in a second. But Koyomi Araragi encounters a vampire called Kiss Shot. I'm just going to cut it down to Kiss Shot, who eventually gets renamed Shinobu. But Kiss Shot is the one that I like. So, encounters a vampire named Kiss Shot, who is dying and is pleading for him to help. And at first, like any normal human being, seeing a person without their limbs lying on the ground begging for help, you run the fuck away like a scared little bitch. Which I can't blame him for, because I think most people seeing a dead woman on the ground bleeding a lot with really sharp teeth saying, "Please let me suck out all your blood," would probably give quite the adverse reaction. But his conscience gets the better of him as he walks away, and he decides to let her suck his blood. Taking a liking to the guy, she doesn't suck out quite all of it, and he gets transformed into a vampire. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything, but at the end of the movies, he's cured. Kind of. For the most part. He still has incredible healing ability, and, the whole teeth thing that they brought up for no really good reason. So, he's now mostly human again, and retained the small bit of vampiric healing ability. Now that he's encountered these vampires and these demons and these vampire hunters and all of these crazy, supernatural beings, they seem to pop up everywhere now. There's all over the place, popping up like freaking wildfire. So over the course of the show, the many different shows, he encounters many of these demons and other creatures that he has to basically fight. Not necessarily. It depends on the situation. Some of them they have to fight. Some of them they don't have to fight. It's a very it's dependent upon what is they. Well, what's interesting is it's not really the anime bad guy of the week scenario. It's more of the anime arc of the 3-week scenario, sometimes 4. I think it's really cool that one of the things that they do with this series is that not only, one, do you see actual development of the storyline happen, but 2, that these anime bad guys that they have to fight are, well, that he has to fight, are like 3, 4, even 5 episodes long, sometimes even longer, and are like entire arcs about this specific battle and character. And so you see, even in the opening, like it's that huge. You see the opening change to specifically fit the character of the story now that Araragi has to focus on, which is actually really cool, and I do like that a lot. I've decided to kind of give ratings to each of these sections, so like I'm going to rate this plot a 4 out of 5, so it's a really intriguing plot. There's definitely some plot holes, and the whole randomly having episodes to discuss his fetishes type thing definitely holds it back a little bit. But it's a really interesting plot, and when they're not having these random ass episodes where he discusses his fetishes with random ass chicks, not even ones that he necessarily likes, it kind of kills the momentum a little bit. But the story itself is so intriguing and very interesting that it actually kind of makes up a little bit for the fact that that happens occasionally, especially when there's this lovely thing called the fast forward button that you can just click on and fast forward. Obviously, I didn't do that because that's not something that I personally do, but I know a lot of people will do it and should do it in these situations. But what's great is that the entire show just in itself does make up for that part, those parts of the show. So probably a solid 4 out of 5 for the plot here. There are a lot of characters in the show, like a lot. So I'm just gonna focus on the 4 main ones. If you guys are, I mean, my favorite character honestly isn't one of these 4. It's Hachikuji, but you guys just have to watch the show to see her and her just greatness. But let's start with the main character, Koyomi Araragi. And, well, he's a perverted teenager. He's kind of a failure in school. Not really. It's basically your normal teenage male harem main character for the most part. Most of the time you see the main character of a harem anime run away and like, oh my gosh, this chick just took off her clothes in front of me, or some, random ass ecchi moment thing garbage, right? But this dude wants that, and I think that would be a lot of male teenage perverted dudes reaction to that kind of situation, is they'd be like, hell yeah, that's dope. He definitely has a really noble sense of justice, and he's got this selfless recklessness that draws the female characters to him. So he goes out there and he saves this chick that he barely even knows. And so obviously this chick's like, what? This guy was going to sacrifice his life just to save little old me? Ah. But, I mean, in some cases I can see it happening. But in other cases, like, his perverted weirdness is just kind of overwhelming. Like with Hachikuji, my favorite character, he does have these really weird problems with her. Which kind of kills him as a character a little bit, not gonna lie, but honestly, it's a very, at least a very kind of realistic one, I think. Because he's going to sacrifice himself for pretty much anyone that he believes needs his help. And, he's a teenager, so obviously he's going to be this horny little piece of shit. So, I think that, all things considered, he's a very good character that was well built. Again, though, the whole thing where he just discusses his perverted fantasies with these random ass chicks that, aren't one of the ones that he likes. Like, honestly, if he sat down with either Hitagi or Hanekawa, the 2 chicks that are his main love interests, is the one that he really is infatuated with, that wouldn't necessarily surprise me as much, because those 2 are kind of horny bitches, but, again, teenager stuff. But, like, he sits down with this random chick that he saved, like, 3 episodes ago, and has, or his sister, talks to his sister about his perverted fantasies. That is just a little much. That is just a little, I think that's a little over the top. I don't know about you guys. If you guys, discuss with your siblings, about your perverted side and have this the toothbrush scene is ridiculous. You'll have to see, because it's kind of wild. The show's really wacky, which, for some people, especially people that like that kind of ecchi comedy type stuff, this might actually be the perfect thing for you, because it's a mix of that kind of random comedy around, these random perverted things. But what's interesting is it's mostly talking. It's not like actual actions like you see in these other harem anime, you know, where they fall on this guy and he grabs their boob and, oh my gosh, and then the chick ends up falling for him anyway, even though in a real life scenario, or just a random logical chick would just either, well, one, freak out, and two, probably hate the dude, even if it was an accident. But they probably wouldn't hit him, I don't think. I don't know. Um, but, the idea is that it doesn't have a whole hell of a lot of that. But then we move on to Kiss Shot, aka Shinobu. Just to get off Koyomi. She is a 500-year-old plus vampire. And due to the events of that first series, Kizuma Monogatari, the movies 1, 2, and 3, she's tiny. She's a little kid. And she's really quiet. And at least for the entire, first season, just call it first season, she doesn't do anything. She sits there in a corner and is really sad all the time. But she's an awesome character just in general, but slowly as the show progresses, she starts to come out of that shell and start to actually do things. It's just at the beginning she's really upset over the stuff that happened in Kizuma Monogatari, which for people watching the show in 2010 when Kizuma Monogatari did not exist, they just thought she was being pouty. But she's a 500-year-old vampire, and due to the situation of Kizuma Monogatari, she's stuck in the body of a little kid, and the only person she can suck blood from is the main character, Koyomi. And she's kind of trapped, right? Two of them are connected based on the stuff that happens in Kizuma Monogatari, which is explained at some point. Again, you're going to have to watch the show if you want to know, but the two are connected. And she basically can live in his shadow, which is very interesting, as a vampire. And if she drinks more than her fair share of blood, she can, for a temporary amount of time, go into this kind of teenage-ish form to help Araragi fight some of these demons. But only if he really needs it, because it does have to give up a pretty substantial amount of blood in order to do it. Yeah, so they have this really weird hate-love relationship type thing, where they both hate each other because they're both bound to each other for reasons that are very selfish for both of them, but also very selfless for both of them. And basically because of these situations, they absolutely despise one another, but they also really like each other, and they like each other's company. So it's a very interesting scenario with Kiss Shot. Then we move on to Tsundere-chan. Not even kidding you. What's his name? Mei, who will not be covering in this character's art, but he's just this kind of wandering bounty hunter type guy that fights demons. But Hitagi Senjuahara, I hope I'm saying that right, probably not, but Hitagi Senjuahara is known as Tsundere-chan to that guy, and actually calls herself a tsundere, which is really interesting. But she kind of has the kind of abusive style that you see out of tsunderes, at least at the beginning. And while she's sharp-tongued and abusive, and she does call herself a tsundere, she is actually a really kind, cheerful, and nice person. And as the show progresses, she slowly becomes less abusive and sharp-tongued and spiteful, and becomes a lot better and nicer and less irritable all the time. And I think part of that is the whole harem thing kind of sort of going on. But Araragi actually chooses someone, so there's that too. Um, but she honestly um, is someone that Araragi often finds himself confiding in a sense. Not nearly as much as Hanekawa, which is basically Araragi's best friend, and only friend, really, at least at the beginning of the show. Only as the show progresses and as he fights these demons does his extensive friendship harem stuff going on becomes much greater. But Tsubasa Hanekawa is kind of this really mysterious girl who tries to befriend the Araragi at the beginning of the show, and in Nekomonogatari Kuro, the very first season of the Monogatari series, she's basically his only friend. Um, they have this kind of odd connection due to the events of Kizumonogatari, and Araragi, often alone, now has someone to confide in. She's also really intelligent, the class president, and, she's really has a lot of problems that Araragi has to help her with, especially at the beginning of the series. She, has a lot of family problems, and she's really sad a lot of the time, and Araragi kind of realizes that, and due to, demons taking a liking to people with these kind of strange problems, he has to basically save her life. And because of the events that happen, he's very protective. There you go, protective of her, and they're like really, really, really close friends. And yeah, I mean, she's a very reliable source of information. Again, very intelligent, class president, and that because of that, she helps out Araragi whenever he is missing information, when he's upset, when he's endangered, and needs some psychological support, I guess you could say. Um, she often says this phrase quite a bit, like all the time. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy that's just her phrase that she says like all the time. Um, But those are the really four main characters of this entire series over the course of this show, and they really add to this kind of interesting diversity that you see in the Monogatari series that a lot of other shows try to do. Because each of these characters builds on an already existing character trope. I mean, that's pretty much any good character builds on an already existing character trope, because I mean there's been so many characters that have existed, there's no way you can truly build one that's honestly unique. So they just build on these, and they make at least seemingly unique characters. um Next we move on. Oh, but the characters are about a 4 out of 5 in my opinion. Also, a very, very good cast of characters that are very interesting and definitely add to the show itself. I think that that's a very solid 4 out of 5 for the characters here. The opening and soundtrack, of course, there's a lot of openings. There are, what, 6 different series of anime on this thing, if I remember correctly. Seven different series. I'm including the movies as an entire series, all 3 of them as one series. So 7 different anime series in the Monogatari series. And on top of that, each opening changes per demon monster thing that Araragi has to fight for the season. So that's kind of huge in a sense. The soundtrack is really good, and there are some good openings, and there are some really bad openings. So I'm just gonna set this as a solid 3 out of 5. A very average score right there, because I do think that there are some solid sounds or what solid music tracks in the soundtrack and of the openings, but there are also some bad ones that I don't think are very good. So it kind of balances out, and I think that that's a very average score for the music in the course of this show. Um, the animation for this show is also pretty solid. The 2010 stuff and the stuff that's not really new anymore is really good, and I think it's very interesting to point out that this is like an extremely widescreen show. Like they cut off about like that much of the screen right there, just about, and so it's like really really wide and really small. So it's like if you had a really, really, really narrow TV, that would be like the perfect thing to watch it on. It's kind of an interesting thing that happens from time to time. At least in a sense, like it doesn't do it all the time. It's really confusing. You would have to watch it to understand what I'm trying to say in that case. But the animation itself is not really much of a problem. It's about what you would expect from an anime made, during the time periods that it is. Honestly, there's nothing really too exceptional. The fight scenes are really well animated, as expected from a show, made in 2017 to 2010. A newer anime definitely has good animation sequences, and I think that there's not really a whole hell of a lot to say about the animation itself. It's just really well done, but it's not really all that exceptional as well. It's about what you would expect from an anime made nowadays, so I'm going to give it a solid 3 out of 5, a pretty average score there. Not really much else to say about that. This is only available in sub. There are, I believe, 62 episodes of this series in total over the course of the 7 different series within the series. So it is a somewhat long show, about as long as Full Metal Alchemist is, roughly. And it is only available in sub, which for people who are, the dub is the way of life, I apologize, but I do think that the sub is really good. I do like the way that the sub sounds. Hachikuji messing up Araragi's name is probably my favorite thing, which you can't really dub over, to be honest with you. What is interesting is that this show hasn't even gotten consideration for a dub, considering that it came out in 2010. That's kind of wild, because it's not like really ecchi in a sense. The only problem is that it is bloody as fuck. I mean, at least more so than a lot of shows nowadays. But I've seen shows that got dubbed that have, a similar amount of blood and gore and stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. But I do like the sub. I think the sub is really good. I think they did a very good job on that front. So, not really much to complain about. I'm not really going to give a score to the sub. Usually this is where I say, well, the dub is better than the sub, or the sub is better than the dub. But there's only a sub for this show, so there's not really much to compare here. It's a pretty solid one, which brings me to the overall score of the show. Now, for the overall score, I'm going to give it a rating out of 5. If I give it a 0 or a 1, that means do not watch the show. Avoid it like the plague. If I give it a 2, that means it's going to be a very specific audience, and there are going to be very few people that I would recommend this show to. And then 3 and 4 would recommend streaming it, go on Crunchyroll or something and stream the show because it's really good. Or a 5, which is I think that you should buy the show because it's freaking amazing. So I'm going to give this show a 3. Now, I want your guys' suggestions here on other things that I should talk about in my anime reviews. I think I covered most of everything, but if there's something that I missed that you guys want to know about in these reviews, something that you're very interested in, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I'm missing here. But if there is something, make sure to comment in the comment section and let me know, what you guys want to see. But I'm giving this a 3. I think that the plot and characters are really good. And I do think that they are pretty solid. But I do think the random episodes that do kind of counter the plot and take away from the story with their random fetish episodes and shit does take away from the show at least a little bit. Not to mention, it is one of those shows that is going to have a specific audience, at least to some degree. I do think people from outside the audience could like the show, but, if you don't like lots of fight scenes and, kind of these random perverted funny sequences, you're not going to like the show most likely. There are going to be rare exceptions of people who actually like the show, but if neither of those things are for you, then odds are the show isn't going to be for you either. I do think it is going to be a good watch, though, for especially the people who like the kind of really cool fight scenes and stuff, and also kind of like the kind of silly, funny, perverted stuff, which is actually a pretty large audience. That's why it's still a thing, is it not? If it didn't work, they wouldn't be still doing it. You know what I'm saying? Honestly, what I liked about the show is I liked the characters a lot. For me, the show really relies a lot on the characters, and so I liked Hitagi, and I liked Hachikuji, and I liked his sister Karen, and I liked the one martial arts chick that I can't quite remember off the top of my head that liked Hitagi for a second. I do like those characters a lot, and they really saved the show for me in a sense. If the characters weren't as well developed, I probably would have dropped the show just because I'm not a huge fan of the whole ecchi ridiculousness. Like, I had to skip. I would have liked to skip the scenes with the that are just random episodes of him talking about his fetishes. I didn't skip them. I know that was a misspeak, but I would have really liked to be honest with you. And if I wasn't doing a review on it, it very well could have happened, to be honest with you. The action scenes were really good. It's not like I hate action sequences or anything, but the whole unnecessary amount of blood sometimes got to me as well. I don't know. I'm not saying I didn't like the show, though. The characters really did save it for me, and there were some elements of the actual story itself that were very interesting. But for those people who have a hard time, understanding a plot, this is probably going to be difficult. So I'm going to give you real quick the order at which you watch these in terms of chronologically. If you want to know the order in which they're made, you can definitely go and you can easily find that out. But it took me a hot second to figure out the chronological order until I actually found a place that had them. But the Kizu Monogatari movies 1 through 3, you watch those first. Those are what happened before all of this stuff. Now they're relatively new, so you can tell that these were made like last year. I think it was just the third movie that was made last year. I think the first two were 2 years ago. Can't quite remember off the top of my head. And then Neko Monogatari Kuro was the one made in 2010. That was the very, very first season. Then there's Bake Monogatari, Nisei Monogatari, Monogatari second season, Hana Monogatari, and Tsuki Monogatari is the last one. And that totals about 62, 64 episodes. I can't quite remember off the top of my head either, but a very large number of episodes. It is definitely worth a watch, especially if you like the generic action sequences and if you like, the random ecchi funny moments or whatever. I do think that is a pretty solid show. I think it does have a pretty large audience, which is why a lot of people have watched it. I've heard about the Monogatari series since, I started, since I was really young into this stuff in 2010 when it first came out. I heard a lot of stuff about the Monogatari series, and I thought about watching it, but I wasn't able to get around to it until just recently. As for recommendations, now, this is a vampire show, so I cannot help but recommend Shiki, which is my favorite vampire show, anything. My favorite show or story or whatever you want to call it about vampires. It is my favorite of all time. It's a very dark vampire show, very intense. It's not funny though. It doesn't have the humor and comedy that this show has. It is straight up about vampires trying to take over a small town, and it is very, very good, and I'd highly recommend you go check that out. It is significantly better than this show, in my opinion. If you like vampires at all, you need to watch this show. Even if you don't like vampires that much, and you like kind of dark, intense storylines about, dudes trying to save people from dying, this is still the show that you should probably watch, because I think it is one of those that you really, really should watch. I actually own it. I'd probably rate it a 5, that you should probably get the series. It is just absolutely terrific. Another show, this one's kind of going on a limb here. I like to do 2 shows that I've watched, and then a third one depends if, I feel like it's necessary. But the next one I'm going to say is The World God Only Knows. Now, I know this is going to be a stretch. This one's probably more watched than the Monogatari series. But it's a harem-esque style feel that's very funny. It doesn't have... It's the opposite of kind of the Shiki recommendation. This doesn't have the kind of dark, intense, violent ridiculousness going on. It does have some intense moments, especially in Season 3, but Kitsuragi is the god of playing video games. Well, not really just video games in general, but dating sims. The god of dating sims. And, he is forced to make chicks fall in love with him so that he can fill the void in their heart, and these demons possessing them will escape. Honestly, though, my biggest issue, especially with this series, is that the manga is significantly better, especially because my favorite character of that series, and one of my top 3 favorite characters of all time, tied with Ibuki, is going to be Yui, and she doesn't get as much time as she needs. Her arc is my favorite arc in that entire series, and they don't do it in the anime. They do her second arc in the anime, which is pretty dope, but... So I highly recommend that one, especially if you like the humorous kind of side of this story. Now, the next one is a blind recommendation. I have not watched this show, so don't go too crazy with it. But it is the number 1 recommendation on my anime list for this show, and it also is one of the top 150 shows rated on my anime list as well. It is a very popular show. I have heard about it, but I have not watched it myself. I don't know how good it is. But it's called Monogatari. And it's not involved in this show at all, but it is made by the same anime studio as this one. And it's basically about this guy that can transform his body into a weapon, and they fight a bunch of bad guys. That's all I really know about it. Um, but it is made by the same studio, and as far as I know, it has a kind of similar feel, especially in the fighting aspect. I don't think it's a harem anime, so I don't think you have to worry too much about that. But that is a blind recommendation, so I would not necessarily just, oh, you recommended this, how dare you? It's a blind recommendation. But that's about all the time we have for this episode. So make sure in the comment section you let me know how you feel about the show. Avoid spoilers, please. But do give me some feedback. Also, for those of you who haven't watched the show and you guys want something different, if I've said too much about the show, if there's something you want me to change, I'd highly recommend commenting and letting me know. Make sure you click that thumbs up button down below for me. I really appreciate the support. It means a lot to me if you just click that thumbs up button. I know it's not a lot of work, but it does mean so much. And that's about all the time we have for this episode. Make sure you go back and check out my other 3 anime reviews that are on there right now. And we'll see you next time.